record.
All right, well, welcome again, friends, to another update on Nibiru. And the photo in this first slide is the best view, the best photo of Nibiru taken thus far. It was taken in December of last year over the skies of Venice, California, which I believe is a suburb of Los Angeles. And it appeared in a few different places, but except for Zetatalk, it was not identified as such, i.e. the Nibiru complex. So you can see this thing is getting close now, and as we shall see in the next slides, it's having a pretty big effect on planet Earth now. Not that the powers that be want you to know about that, they want to keep you dumb and dumber. And Zetatalk is here to change that, and I'm here to help them change that understanding of what is actually going on. Okay, we'll start with a political focus. In early January this year, that's 2026, President Trump ordered that the U.S. government withdraw from 66 international treaties. This action was reported in the U.S. media, but not here in Australia, as far as I know. Okay, and this is a quote from the BBC News, dated the 6th of January this year. The headline, Trump withdraws U.S. from key climate treaty and dozens of other groups. U.S. President Donald Trump has withdrawn the U.S. from dozens of international organizations, including many works that combat climate change. Nearly half of the 66 affected bodies are UN related, including the Framework Convention on Climate Change, a treaty that underpins all international efforts to combat global warming. Now, to make a long story short, global warming is a huge hoax perpetrated by the establishment. It's basically a Nibiru cover-up. I've covered this a number of times in previous lectures, but just to remind you, whenever you hear the phrase global warming, you know that a hoax or a fake is in place. However, when you hear the phrase climate change, you can say, yes, the climate is definitely changing. That's for sure. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. The problem is that the predatory elite and the people who control the media want you to believe that climate change is the result of global warming, or global warming is the base or seed for climate change, and there's actually no relation between the two. A complex subject indeed. Okay, the article continues. Groups working on development, gender equality, and conflict, areas the Trump administration has repeatedly dismissed as advancing globalist or woke agendas, and I actually agree with Trump and his administration about labeling those views as globalist or woke, are also included. The White House said the decision was taken because those entities no longer serve American interests and promote ineffective or hostile agendas. And while that is true to some extent, the real reason that Trump withdrew from these treaties is not being stated, i.e., that they are part of the Nibiru cover-up, and they're promoting an agenda which is faux or false or whatever. Okay, next slide, please. All right, this is the Zetatalk comment from January this year. Climate change was a concept invented to explain the Earth changes caused by Nibiru, and that's the bottom line. Climate change was illogical when the globe was heating from the bottom up. And when they say heating from the bottom up, they mean that the Earth's core is heating and expanding due to the complex interaction between the Earth and Nibiru. And that heating core is basically what's responsible for a lot of the bushfires we see here in Australia, especially the big fires we saw a few years ago. I don't remember the exact date. I think it was 2019, 2020, something like that, when Morrison was still prime minister. Okay, rather than an increased carbon footprint due to CO2 in the air, and that's the hoax. That's the hoax. We're experiencing climate change, yes, we are, and the reason is carbon emissions caused by humanity, which is completely false. The U.S. firmly cooperating with the Nibiru cover-up joined the cry as a signatory. So that was under Ronald Reagan. And of course, it wasn't just Reagan that was involved under Clinton and Al Gore. That sort of phony agenda was also advanced to a certain extent. Most were within the United Nations, where the US had a leadership role and thus was forced to join. This has been in place for decades. So why suddenly withdraw from 66 treaties, essentially withdrawing US support? And that's a good question. And the media, the mainstream media, wants us to believe that it's because Trump is a bad person or he's a crazy man. And I don't think he's a bad person, but I think he's made some bad decisions in recent weeks and months. We could talk about that endlessly. We're not going to touch much on that in this lecture, though. The Nibiru cover-up is collapsing under the weight of evidence that Nibiru exists and is lining up for a passage. There can be no stronger sign that this is imminent than having President Trump withdraw from every treaty or agreement that says otherwise. And that's the true reason for Trump's withdrawal. Unfortunately, Trump does not have the courage or whatever to come out and state the truth, which is Nibiru exists and we're heading for a passage, and it's going to be a rather difficult experience. The alternative is living a lie that climate change is due to mankind's mismanagement and that Nibiru does not exist, and forcing US corporations to maintain efforts to reduce their carbon footprint. And that's the big hoax. That's the big lie. Now, every time we have a COP conference, Council of the People, which is always December of each year, and it changes from country to country, and we get these delegates from around the world, and it's a big talk fest, basically. It's a big hot air talk fest. They talk for a week or 10 days, and they basically come up with no agreement. That's what happened this year. I think it was in Brazil, if I'm not mistaken. The year before, it was in another country, and so on. This is a huge waste of time, in my opinion, but it's part of the predatory elitist cover-up over the existence of Nibiru and the phony hoax theory that climate change, which once again is true, climate is definitely changing, is due to human-produced carbon dioxide in the air. What next? This is a tacit admission that Nibiru exists and allows President Trump to tell the truth. Okay, now I think this is a very good explanation, except for the last sentence. And I have to disagree, despite my great respect for Zedek, I have to disagree, and rather strongly, that it's a tacit admission that Nibiru exists. No, it's not an admission that Nibiru exists. It's simply silence on the part of President Trump, the same silence that all other previous presidents, especially President Obama, if you saw the lecture that I gave, I think a month or two ago, no, I think it was December, on the true story of Obama, which is rather shocking, rather disturbing. They have covered it up, and Trump is continuing the cover up. And every one of those presidents, including Trump, is to be criticized, heavily criticized, in my opinion, for covering up the truth from the American people and the world. But the cover up continues, and that's the sad part. Allows President Trump to tell the truth? Well, the truth is that Nibiru exists, and the American government has known about this for decades, and they're preparing for the imposition of martial law because they don't want panic when Nibiru finally becomes so obvious that no one can deny it. So President Trump has not told the truth yet. Zedek, in my opinion, has a rosy view, or view through rosy glasses, that Trump is somehow this great leader, this great tactician who's going to change things. No, I'm sorry. Given his decisions for the last few weeks and months, I certainly disagree with that analysis, although I do think that Trump has done some good things, some very good things. One of the really good things he did was withdraw the United States from the Paris Climate Agreement. But he didn't tell Americans in the world why he did that, which is that the real cause of climatic change is Nibiru. And so we're in this very strange, very surreal, call it a negative Neptune sort of headspace where Trump is doing some good things because he knows the truth, but he's not telling Americans or the world what the truth really is. And I think that is a problem for him, and it's going to be an even bigger problem for him in the weeks and months ahead. Next slide, please.
All right.
Okay, well, this is a composite montage of the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And as we know, for years, I think even decades, they've been issuing these dire warnings about climate change. And once again, climate change is quite correct. It's quite true. It's happening. A lot of disasters, heat waves, floods. I mean, we've seen it here in Australia just the last couple of weeks, these fires all around Victoria. Thank God they're now been extinguished, most of them anyway. And the interesting thing from the political perspective is if you adopt a viewpoint from the so-called left-wing or progressive spectrum, that would be the Australian Greens and most of the Australian Labor Party. You accept the explanation that it's carbon dioxide emissions, human-made carbon dioxide emissions that are causing these climate changes. Well, they certainly have that wrong, in my opinion, but they're right about climate change. However, if you look at the right spectrum, the right side, that is to say, the conservative spectrum or the right side of politics, not necessarily being the correct side, but the right hand side, and that would be the coalition, the Liberal Party, especially the Nationals, whatever. They know deep inside that the so-called explanation about climate change being caused by carbon emissions is incorrect. They know that. They feel it. They understand that. But what they don't understand is what is the cause of the climate change. So you get both sides of politics that are partly correct, but also very wrong in their understanding of the core issues involved, which is the presence of Nibiru and the fact that the Earth's core, molten core, is heating up, which is causing a lot of heat-related events on the surface, and especially that the Earth's daily axial rotation is wobbling, exposing some parts of the Earth to more sunlight than others, according to the season, which basically indicates a heating trend, while exposing other parts of the Earth to less sunlight than normal, seasonally adjusted, which indicates cooling trends. That's what's happening according to Zeta Talk, and my firm belief that is the explanation, but neither side of politics is talking about it because of the extensive, all-pervasive Nibiru cover-up imposed on humanity by the predatory elitists. Next slide, please. Okay, now you probably haven't heard that the U.S. sponsored or hosted a meeting of 34 Western Hemisphere defense chiefs just yesterday, 11 February 2026. And here's the Zeta Talk analysis. Martial law has been activated in the U.S. on the creep. This was apparent when President Trump sent the National Guard into cities to fight crime, when talk of the Insurrection Act of 1807 began appearing in the media, when a winter weather storm became so severe that half the U.S. is under a national emergency. And you may have heard that the U.S. has been hit by some, reasonably bad winter storms, but I didn't know how bad it was until I saw a video, which is the very end of this lecture. If we can manage to get it online, we might not be able to do it, in which they showed just how bad it is. It is pretty bad, my friends. The cold in America, like snowfall in Florida, a state in the southern, one of the southern states that almost never gets snow, and many, many other examples. We'll try to get the video up at the very end of this lecture. Now, President Trump has called 34 countries meeting at the Western Hemisphere Chiefs of Defense Conference to discuss protecting the Western Hemisphere. That is the official narrative. Let's get all these chiefs together from Canada, Mexico, Central America, South America, talk about protecting our beloved Western Hemisphere. But the real direction, the real reason for the meeting is far different. The cause of this silent martial law imposition on the creep is not mentioned, which is Nibiru. And here is the problem. Trump is doing what he feels should be done, but he's not telling the truth about why he's doing it. And once again, that contradiction between outer actions taken because of what he knows, but a continuing silence on his part about what is the real cause of this is causing some huge problems in America and in fact around the world. The plan imposed requires silence until the last possible minute so as not to exhaust the military prematurely. Well, that may be true, but in my opinion, it's time for Trump or whatever head of state in whatever nation to stand up and tell the truth for God's sakes. We've been waiting long enough. We, the Zetas, have stated early in the Zeta Talk saga that the public will cooperate with a martial law edict if they see there is a valid reason for this. And that's an extremely important and a very valid sentence. It's so important, I'm just going to repeat it again. The public will cooperate with a martial law edict if they see there is a valid reason for this. So let's explain to the people that Nibiru exists. It's getting closer to the Earth, and there will be a pole shift in about a year's time, possibly less. We don't know. This would require admitting that Nibiru exists and is lining up for a close passage, thus the conundrum. The exact date when this point is reached is unknown because the Council of Worlds controls this trigger event. So that's what this meeting is really all about. Let's talk about how we can impose martial law on the creep gradually so as not to disturb the sleeping ignorant masses. And yet we're going to delay the announcement about Nibiru as long as we can to keep the masses in ignorance. Sorry, folks, ain't going to work. Next slide, please. Meanwhile, Nibiru-induced earth changes continue to happen right around the globe, and especially earthquakes, which are increasing in frequency and magnitude. Due to the Nibiru cover-up on the part of the establishment, the reasons for all that are being kept secret as the predatory elitists keep the masses in ignorance. Okay, here's a post from late January, presumably from the United States. There have been 16 magnitude 5 to 5.8 earthquakes today. That's just in one day, which is way more than normal. Wow. No magnitude 6 or 6 plus quakes, but instead a widespread distribution of seismic energy released across many plate boundaries and even some interior faults. For instance, a 5.5 quake in China. And you can see on the left the diagram that was from the 26th of January. On the right, you see the diagram, the diagrammatic scheme of the earthquakes, various earthquakes, presumably on that same date. So a lot's happening, that's for sure, in the Earth changes sphere. And we're not really being told a lot about that, sad to say. Next slide, please. All right, another comment from Zeta Talk. The USGS is the United States Geological Survey, and that's the official organization based in the United States, but it has worldwide influence, which officially measures earthquakes and especially their magnitudes, how strong they are. And they regularly post information, data about this or that earthquake in this or that place. You can look on their website on the internet and find lists, very, very long list actually, because there's so many earthquakes happening. The USGS is participating in the Nibiru cover-up by downgrading the magnitude of quakes. This has been evident for decades and is evident in charts. The intensity of quakes reflects how tightly earth plates are jammed against each other so that a jolt travels from one to another. And early on in these lectures, I talked about a lot about the tectonic signature of planet Earth and how these plates interconnect and how when one plate moves, especially movement around the edge of the plate, it affects the adjoining plate. And there's a lot to cover in that, many, many details, which we won't go into today. The USGS downgrading of magnitude is deliberate. So for instance, any magnitude 6 or above is held to be at magnitude 5.9, thus will not register on charts, meaning that the USGS charts basically are only apparently showing quakes which are, or listing quakes as major if they're 6 or above. They do list some of the minor quakes, 4, 3, 4, whatever, but they're being downplayed or downgraded. And that's because the USGS and behind them, the predatory elitist establishment, do not want the public to become alarmed. They don't want the public to know, first of all, that the tectonic plates of planet Earth are shifting and shaking and moving and rocking and rolling like they have not done for the past 3,500 years. That refers to the last passage of Nibiru in approximately 1600 BC. They don't want people to know that. Continuous plate movement is expected for some areas. Next slide, please. Okay, and here's a close-up of the earthquake map for 26 January that we saw 2 slides previously. You can certainly see in the diagram at the top, there's a lot of activity going on around the Mediterranean, especially around Turkey, around some southern Greece, some quakes around Italy, southern Spain, France, and whatever. And when you look at the bottom diagram, you can see there's really a whole lot going on, whole lot going on. And once again, we're not really being informed by the media about how extensive this is, about how widespread it is. I mean, when there are big floods, like the recent floods, I think hit parts of Spain and Portugal, that was reported simply because the floods were so massive. But otherwise, they're trying to downgrade this, trying to lull people into a false sense of security. Oh, it's fine, things are fine. You just keep shopping. That's what we're here for, and leave it to us, the experts, to let you know if there's any problems. But of course, that's exactly what they don't want people to know, that we do have a problem, and it's called Nibiru, and it's a big one. Next slide, please. All right, let's shift back to May of 2010. That's almost 16 years ago. Talk about the Wilton Windmill crop circle that occurred in Wiltshire in the United Kingdom. As you're probably aware, each season, each planting season, especially in the United Kingdom, from about April or May onwards, crop circles appear, some of them quite spectacular in their design. Some of those circles are hoaxes, yes. The predatory elitists don't want the slumbering, sleeping humanity to understand that these crop circles are basically messages, coded messages, symbolic messages from extraterrestrials trying to wake people up and warn them about certain factors. They don't want humans to know that. So they have their little circle makers go out in the middle of the night, and they've gotten to a pretty good state of proficiency in making fake circles. But you can tell the difference between a real circle, i.e. extraterrestrial made, and a fake circle, i.e. crop circle hoaxer made, by the layout of the grain. This is or was a legitimate design from almost 16 years ago. Upon examining this crop circle, one will find that the 12 sections never have a line notch that matches a line notch on another section, and you can see that quite clearly. What do the 12 sections represent, and what do the notches represent? Since the Gregorian calendar is universal, we confirm that it is months. The notches represent significant seismic activity or plate movement. And that's the key to the symbolism of this various crop circle. Now, when I looked on the internet, I saw some comment by, I think, a well-meaning individual, but someone who didn't have a clue said, well, this is actually a design representing a computer floppy disk, and it's all about technology and digital technology, blah, blah, blah. Well, sorry, nowhere near the truth, in my opinion anyway. So the notches represent significant seismic activity or plate movement. This tends to get hot in one area, then the stage moves to another area. We are not yet at the point where significant plate movements in one area does not start and stop, it just keeps going. But at this point in time, almost 16 years after that circle appeared, we are in that particular phase. Rock fingers are still holding the plates in their current positions in the main, so there is some movement and then a halt as a new catch points take hold. And again, that was true about 16 years ago, 15, 16 years ago. Sadly now, that is not really the case. At least in some areas of the Earth, it's not the case because there's continuous movement. As to whether this crop circle showing 12-month slices indicates we have a year of this type of halting plate movement to anticipate, realize that this circle could represent months past or even a year of past activity, but we predict that no timeline clues will be able to be discerned with certainty from this crop circle. And that's true enough. You can't get an exact timeline read from examining this circle. But once you understand the symbolism behind it, what the extraterrestrials are trying to convey, what they're trying to warn humanity about, you realize, okay, we're in a serious position, at least even back then, 16 years ago. And now it's become even more problematic. Next slide, please. Okay, another clue as to why Zetatalk predicts, I covered this in the last lecture, Note Nibiru 12. The Zetatalk predicted that President Trump will make an announcement regarding the reality of UFOs and extraterrestrials on the 79th anniversary of the Roswell, New Mexico crash, and that happened in July 1947. Also a clue as to the real reason Trump wants to take over Greenland, and this is the Zetatalk comment. This is a question, first of all. There's a post talking about a spaceship located in some country that is so big they couldn't move it. Instead, they built a building around it. Would the Zetas like to comment? And the answer is, what is the nexus between the rumors that President Trump is going to disclose the alien presence at the Roswell anniversary in July? And I have to say that I don't believe President Trump will do this. He doesn't have the courage or the integrity, in my opinion, to stand up and give the world a straight answer. I'm sorry to have to say it, but that's my strong opinion. So when the 79th anniversary of the Roswell incident occurs on the 6th of July, comes and goes, and still no announcement, Zetatalk is going to have to explain why he didn't do it. That's my strong feeling. The discussion about the big UFO long rumored to exist and President Trump's determination to secure Greenland as a satellite country of the US. Okay, it's a rumor now, we don't know for sure, but the rumor is the UFO is said to be too big to move and hidden from view. Issues such as garnering technology, alien technology, arise. Greenland has US bases and is sparsely populated, and it is indeed the location. The UFO is too heavy to be airlifted, and its anti-gravity is not operational. Despite all efforts, it cannot be disassembled into pieces, nor can the metal be cut. So that's a very interesting revelation, in my opinion, and intuitively, it strikes a deep note within me of truth, saying, yeah, that could well be true. Be interesting, of course, to examine a UFO that is that big, but is not functional. But of course, because the official narrative from the elitists and governments that UFOs don't exist, aliens don't exist, it's all hoax, hallucination, whatever. They're trying to keep this thing secret. So apparently, according to the Zetatalk report, they built this building around it, and it's located somewhere in Greenland. How interesting. Now, doesn't that shed a lot of light on why Trump wants to take over Greenland and make it part of America? There'd be other reasons, of course, but that to me is an interesting comment which has a deep note of truth to it. Next slide, please. Okay, now the picture up top, I'm not sure whether it's a real photo. I don't think it is. I think it's probably a montage because the thing is apparently surrounded by a building, so it's not just out in the open like the photo claims to be. And this is a recent post by someone in America identified as Red Panda Koala. Republican Eric Burleson, that's someone in the United States House of Reps, the lower house, knows the classified location of the UFO too big to move. There is reportedly an object that is not in this country that is so large that it cannot be moved, that they've been building an entire building around it. Greer, that's Stephen Greer, and Stephen Greer is a very interesting man with rather dubious intentions, and I can't go into all of it, but according to Zetatalk, Greer has been co-opted by the CIA. Greer has been broadcasting for years now. He's an American scientist, I forget where he's based, about UFOs and ETs and whatever. But Zetatalk revealed some years ago that he's actually controlled by the CIA, so he's sort of a conduit for CIA disinformation about aliens and UFOs. So Greer is talking about UFOs and aliens, that's good, but he's giving out information which is highly sus. So that's the Zetatalk view of Stephen Greer. Greer, another individual, has actually mentioned the site, but I'm not going to mention it because it is a classified location. I'm requesting to get to it. Well, good luck on that one, Red Panda Koala. It's going to involve a lot to make that happen. That's for damn sure. But that may be the final destination. Well, good luck. I hope you make it. I don't think you will. Unless you have very high contacts in the US military who are trying to cover this thing up. Next slide, please. Okay, this is a question to Zetatalk from this month. The other day we saw the appearance of the effects of 4 suns over Alaska, and today 3 moons were observed over Moscow. Now, surely you would have heard this on the mainstream media, right? Well, actually not, because they want to cover it up, of course. Also, cases of solar halos have become more frequent everywhere. People themselves write that they have lived in these regions for how many years, but they do not recall this, although official sources continue to claim that this is the effect of the formation of ice crystals at high altitudes, scattering sunlight. Ah, we got a scientific explanation. No worries, mate, just ice crystals at high altitudes scatters the sunlight, so you're seeing 4 suns over Alaska and 3 moons over Moscow. Gee, but why haven't we seen that in past years? Oh, never mind that. That's too embarrassing. For some reason, it seems to me that this is already the effect of the scattering of sunlight in the Earth's atmosphere from the Nibiru complex located between the Earth and the Sun. And we talked about that either last lecture or the one before. Also, many people begin to notice that in photographs and videos, the Sun takes on any shape. A rhombus, a square, rectangle, or polyhedron, but not a perfect circle. Would the Zetas like to comment on this on Zeta Talk? And they certainly did that. We'll see the next slide, please, what their answer is. Okay, they have said the reflections on the reflections being seen are not sundogs, but are from a similar scenario. Petrol is burning in the surface of the upper atmosphere. And as I've spoken about many times, the long, long tail of Nibiru is full of petrol and related petrol-like greasy materials. And when it wafts through or touches the upper atmosphere of the Earth, occasionally that petrol ignites. That's what causes sky fire and sky glow, which I talked about extensively in the last lecture I did. Okay, this results in sky glow, but also the results of burnt petrol, water, i.e. ice crystals. So the skies are filled with sundogs from reflected sunlight and direct reflections of the sun and or Nibiru. This will only increase as the passage approaches. That's the Nibiru becomes closer to Earth and finally passes it. It will become even more confusing, like a sky full of mirrors. And you can see some of these very interesting photographs. Not exactly sure where they were taken. Some would be from Alaska, some would be from Moscow. And of course, total media blackout about any or all of this here in Australia. They just don't want you and I to know about it. Next slide, please. Some photos appear to show blobs situated next to the sun or moon. And this is from a Zeta comment just this month. These large petrol blobs are seen in 2 dimensions, so are between Nibiru and the Earth. Like oil pools on the ground, petrol likes to merge and come together. So until it reaches the upper outer atmosphere where there is oxygen, it floats closer to Earth within the wafting tail of Nibiru. These blobs will ultimately culminate in the sky glow we have predicted, and sky glow occurs when those blobs ignite. And we've seen many, many examples, photographs of sky glow from around the world, sky fire as well. And sky glow is composed of fires on the edge of the outer atmosphere. And according to this prediction, which I certainly believe, we'll be seeing a lot more of that in the future. But for now, these blobs next to the sun and moon are unignited petrol blobs from the tail of Nibiru. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, the sun is setting too far north in the northern hemisphere. Here in the southern hemisphere, it's setting too far south. It has been setting too far south for years, especially from about mid-November to this month, mid-February, late February. I've noticed it because I do a lot of work outside in the garden, whatever. And the sun in the summer months is simply setting too far to the south. It hasn't reached due south yet. It's not setting due south. That hasn't happened yet. It may, of course, but it is setting more in a southwesterly direction than in a westerly direction where it should be. Okay, the Zetas were asked in this month. The sun wasn't appearing where it should be. Mr. MBB333 notes that the sun is registering on February the 5th where it should be on the equinox on March 31st. Too early. And from another inquiry, Mr. MBB333 suggests the Earth is in a wobble. And this is a post from either the website or the X account, whatever, of Mr. Mr. MBB333 from Michael Bradbury. And Michael is asking, why did the sun set so far north? Or actually, it's Mr. MB333 who is making the query, why did the sun set so far north? Received a video from Steve in Lockport, New York, who noticed the sun setting roughly 10 degrees farther north than expected based on long used reference points. And I've noticed here in Australia during, as mentioned, the months of mid-November to about mid-February that the sun is setting about 10 to 15 degrees too far south. All right, back to the post. This isn't a claim, it's an observation. Questions about pole shift or axial tilt always come up in cases like this, but documentation comes first. Now, this is very interesting, that last sentence. Actually, Sri Kirti and I exchanged emails about a week ago regarding Mr. MBB333, and we were both asking ourselves, well, why does he appear to be so dumb? I mean, he's posting all this weird stuff, and in the next slide, which we're not going to get to quite yet, there are some interesting videos where he has video evidence of the sun doing weird things and setting too far, whatever, too far north in the northern hemisphere. But he always seems to poop out in the end, and he says, "Well, there are questions about a pole shift. There are questions about an axial tilt, but let's get the documentation right first." Yeah, right. Okay, pal. I'm sure you know much more than you actually are stating on your posts. And Shrikir and I speculated that, we don't know for sure, of course, but we speculated that he was ordered by the predatory elite to shut up, not to talk about uh, the pole shift or axial tilt, because he apparently gets a lot of hits on his videos. I think he gets like 30, 40, 50,000 hits. So again, the predatory elites don't want the truth about coming out, i.e. that the Earth's axis is wobbling, it's tilting, and the sun is rising and setting out of place. They don't want people to know about it. Okay, next slide, please. This is from Zeta Talk this month. We predicted in 2021 that the Council of Worlds could use a severe wobble to force awareness of Nibiru and break the Nibiru cover-up, and that this may even move to the extent that the sun may rise at the North Pole. Well, that's very interesting. That's in the Northern Hemisphere, of course. That hasn't happened yet, but hey, the way things go, I wouldn't be surprised if it did in the weeks or months ahead. We stated that the Christmas surprise this past Christmas was indeed a severe wobble, and that refers to a Zeta Talk post made in mid-December that there was going to be a Christmas surprise coming up. They didn't say what it was, but after the event was over, they were asked and said, yeah, there was a severe wobble on Christmas Day. That would be the northern hemisphere, would be the 26th of December here. Now there are indications that the North Pole is leaning toward the sun, such that an early spring seems to be emerging. Is this in process? This trend is occurring at the same time the severe wobble is causing record temperatures and storms across the globe. And records continue to be set both at the hot and the cold end of the spectrum. Just the fact that records are being set at the cold end of the spectrum rips the global warming theory to shreds, but people haven't figured that out, sadly. These trends will continue to increase as the months pass and the time of the last weeks approach. The Council at all times is in charge and can speed up or slack back at will. They are determined to force awareness of Nibiru's presence and will take the steps necessary for this to occur. The outcome is in play at the present time. What they didn't mention in this recent post is conspicuously absent, in my opinion, is that they didn't make any reference to President Trump. I think we can conclude that President Trump will not make the announcement. He doesn't have the integrity, honor, or courage to do it. And although Zeta Talk implied that he might reveal the truth, I certainly don't think he will. As mentioned, I don't think he's going to make the announcement about the reality of extraterrestrials and aliens on the 6th of July this year, which is the 79th anniversary of the Roswell crash. Ain't going to happen. Sorry. Okay, next slide, please. All right, these are two videos from Mr. MBB333. Quite interesting. I've put the relevant information there, and when this video is posted, with this lecture is posted on the internet, you can check out those videos for yourself. Some very interesting footage in both those videos. Okay, final slide. Now, the thing is, Chandra, can we get this?
Well, I'll